Alright, everybody, it's showtime!
It's showtime.
It's showtime.
It's showtime!
It's showtime!
Now take your position. It's showtime.
Hey, heads up, everybody! It's showtime!
Oh, it's time!
This is the Stand and Deliver Comedy Podcast with Rhodders.
Stand and deliver!
Hello and welcome to the Stand and Deliver Comedy Podcast. My name is Rhodders. Right now I'm a podcaster, but I'm also a stand-up comedian and I'm the promoter at the Stand and Deliver Comedy Club, which exists every second Thursday up above Smoking Billy's in the centre of Reading. We're now on to episode 8 of the podcast, so thanks for everyone who's written a nice iTunes review. In fact, go write one now if you haven't. iTunes.rhodders.com is the quick link to take you through to the iTunes store. And every review massages my ego, yes, sure, but it also gets us up the iTunes chart. The more downloads we get, the more motivated I will be to keep churning out more of these episodes. I say churning out, that makes it sound like a chore, doesn't it? It's a pleasure to talk to some of the people I talk to on this podcast. In fact, all of them. Why would I get on anyone I didn't like? It's basically my way of giving you a peek behind the curtain into the weird world of stand-up comedy. I ask open questions and hopefully comedians open up to me and tell them about their life and comedy in general. It's not necessarily a funny podcast. I don't expect comedy, inverted commas. It's about comedy, but inadvertently, a lot of these people are just naturally funny anyway. And if they're not funny, they're blooming interesting. So our guest today is Joe Bains. I'm trying my best to rack my brains for when I met Joe Bains first. It must have been a while ago, but my main memory of him, but I must have met him before because he booked me for a string of gigs in Edinburgh the first time I ever went up there, and he didn't really know me that well, and he was good enough to put me on every single night for a week, which was lovely of him. And I've been gradually paying him back by booking him every now and again, and he always does a good job, does Joe. And what's particularly interesting about this episode, it shows him as one of life's great go-getters. He has an amazing story to tell. He was born in India, came over here knowing next to no English, had to struggle with that, and also he went from being chronically shy to now a pretty damn good, powerful comic who I've just seen handle some really, really quite tough rooms with just a wonderful affability and a smile. He's just probably one of the more charming comics that I've seen perform on the circuit. He's very interesting, his whole life story. He could have written a book about this, but instead he decided to tell his whole story on my podcast, and I'm very grateful for him doing that. But before, I thought I'd tell one of my own stories. I'd love to know how many people actually just skip my preambles and head straight to the interviews. What I'll do, I might sneak in a chance to win £1 million in the middle of one of my preambles to give you an incentive to listen. I won't. In all honesty, that this podcast, I'm amazed I can afford the web space to put it on. And if you want to hear the tragic tale of why the podcast disappeared, it involves potentially Russian hackers and me going to court. Download the last episode 7, and it of course features a interview with the incredible Russell Hicks, who had some all sorts of opinions on all sorts of things. Is very interesting. So, usually in this podcast, I often tell anecdotes about silly things that have happened at gigs, but sometimes the journey is more important than the destination, so to speak. I had the craziest journey back from a gig in Oxford. I mean, I couldn't really tell you much about the gig. I think it was all right. I tried out some new stuff. It was very productive in that sense, but nothing to podcast about, certainly, or even tell my friends about. But myself and other fellow Reading comics, members of the Reading comedy delegation, myself, Lucas Jolson and Carl Richards, on the way back from a gig in Oxford, and it's like the whole of Oxford had just gone mad. We turned up at the train station. It was chaos. There were queues and queues of people, and there was some sort of fiasco involving rail replacement buses just not being there. And there was a member of station staff who got so angry, not only did he hurl his walkie-talkie into the ground and smash it, he removed one of his shoes and threw it across the railway station. I mean, have you ever been so angry you've removed an item of clothing and launched it projectile style? I don't think I ever have. I mean, it was ridiculous. And then there was a lady sitting on the platform yelling something about how she couldn't talk about it now, but it was all over Instagram. So it sounds like it's already public, whatever was going on in her life. And we managed to find a train, which sometimes the Reading to Oxford, on the way there, no problems. Often on the way back, we have a right palaver. And I think we met one of the drunkest people ever. On public transport, there's always the drunk who turns up and everyone kind of looks away and pretends not to notice, and you're just thinking, oh God, don't make eye contact, don't talk to me. I've done my crowd work for tonight. I had to play a room of drunks. I don't want to talk to another one. And we were all sitting in the back of the train, so the driver's cab at our end obviously wasn't in use because they don't drive trains backwards because that would be ludicrous. And he kept banging on the driver's door, and he eventually came up to us and he was trying to get to Guildford, and this train only went to Reading pretty much. And then when he got to Reading, the denouement to this man's stupidity, I mean, maybe he was a slapstick comic genius, but he then tried to run up the down escalator. Got the best workout ever. I mean, did you see the look on his face? He couldn't work out why he was running hell for leather and not actually making much progress in the vertical up direction. Utterly ludicrous. So sometimes the journeys to gigs are just as memorable, if not more memorable, than the gigs themselves. So I guess the moral is learn to appreciate the everyday, or don't use public transport, whatever you do. I mean, maybe we all should have just chipped in and got an Uber. Would have been much safer. Unless that guy happened to be working for them. Anyway, so let's hear from my guest then. Joe Bains has been engaging and delighting audiences for yonks and yonks with an affable array of great gags, anecdotes and people skills. And I've known him for quite a while, and it's always a pleasure to catch up with him. So here is Joe Bains.
This is the Stand and Deliver Comedy Podcast.
It's the Stand and Deliver Comedy Podcast with me, Rhodders. I'm in the King and Queen's pub ahead of a lovely afternoon gig called Coffee and Comedy, although they only serve instant here, so I think they ought to rebrand.
Cake.
Not happy, they've got a cake. And I'm with Joe Bains. Hello, Joe.
Hello, mate. How you doing? Right.
I'm good. We've known each other a while. In fact, was it the first time we met? Did I meet you in Edinburgh when you were doing Licence to Laugh, or did I meet you just before then?
Yeah. You used to wear a suit, and you came and did loads of gigs at my at one of my gigs shows. That was good. Yeah.
It was Licence to Laugh at the White Horse. It was that year.
Yeah, that's right.
And I did a week worth. I was so grateful for you giving me a week worth of shows. And yeah, I remember it was at midnight.
Yes.
And we did okay, except when there were 2-for-1 theatre tickets.
That's right. Yeah. No, I think it was a Monday or something where it'd be empty, but we had a good run. We had a really good run, and yeah, I was just giving out. I had so many spots, I was just throwing them out. I had a good time there. Learned a lot. I went back the year later, and I did 1 a.m. show, 1 to 2 a.m. show in a nightclub. And there they needed a bouncer permanently because I kept getting threatened by the audience on a regular basis, yeah. So that was good. That was really good.
Because the week I did with you, we got a couple of, they were like the absolute drunken stereotype. There was a man in a kilt who was so drunk, we had to give him directions just to know where to sit down. But there wasn't any... I never felt threatened. What was different the year? Why did it all go wrong? What did you do to them?
So basically, it was in Espionage the next year, and it was a 1 a.m. show. And I found out there's a big difference between midnight and 1 a.m. At midnight, you get the drunks. At 1 a.m., you get what's left over from the drunks. and you can't make any money from it because all they've got is soggy hands and coppers. So if you put a bucket out, all it gets is a few coppers, soggy coppers, basically. So I stopped collecting the bucket within a couple of days. And then the management came and said, look, I hear you keep getting threatened, so we're going to put a permanent security. So I had a high chair in the middle of my comedy night, and on that, right in the middle, a bouncer would sit there. And so when it started...
Did he laugh? If you make him laugh, then you're...
He didn't laugh at all. He just sat there, but it kept... When things started to get out of control, the people around... The audience would see him and sort of... So it never boiled over, whereas if he wasn't there, it would boil over. And I had, literally every night, at least 2 or 3 people would get dragged off by security because I got threatened. I enjoyed that. It was good.
I want to say fair play for many venues would have just said, right, show's too dangerous, let's stop it. But they thought, no, let's give him a bodyguard.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're brave or stupid for carrying on.
Well, I took that spot because I wanted a tough audience. I wanted a drunk, heckly audience, and that is exactly what I got. So I got exactly what I wanted. I wanted a brutal audience, and that's what they gave me.
So it was Bains boot camp, basically.
Yeah,
You sent yourself to comedy boot camp.
That's it. So I did that for the whole month, but I've got to tell you, my skill set just went through the roof because, when you're being threatened, you have to stay relaxed. You have to stay relaxed, yeah.
So now I guess when you have an audience who even is half paying attention and half sober and wants to be there, you must have an easy time.
That's a present, yeah. If they're not threatening you and they're half paying attention, that's a bonus.
It's amazing because you run a gig in Brighton, don't you?
Yeah.
A gong show. Do you have? I think we had a big row at one gig we did recently about the differences of how to set up gigs. I like to make my gig as nice as I can to bring out the best in acts, and I'm not sure if you were just winding me up or whether you were slightly exaggerating. But am I right? You like to make your gigs blooming tough to weed out the weaklings and make them strong comics, or were you exaggerating a bit?
No, not. I don't intentionally do it, but what I do is I go, well, I think a comedian should be able to handle any audience, any room, any type, you know. So a comedian needs to be able to perform, and I think just because you're a comedian and you've got the mic on stage, that doesn't automatically mean you've earned the right of that audience's attention. You have to earn that when you're up there, I think. That's how I see it. And so if you're good and you can prod them enough and you get their attention, then well done. But if you don't and they start talking and they start cackling, then it means you just need to up your game. So I think an audience doesn't just automatically owe you their attention. You have to earn it.
Isn't there a bit of give and take, though? Like I resist. I do ban myself from blaming the audience because normally it's because I could have done better.
Yeah.
But there are some nights, like if they're sat facing the wrong way, or if it just isn't a place that's suited for comedy, or the promoter hasn't put in any effort whatsoever, and he's just brought in a stag do. Isn't there a?
Yeah, no, I agree, but that's for a proper nightclub. I'm talking more about because we're at the stage where we're learning, we're trying to grow, and you're not going to grow in a perfect room. You know, like if you've got the perfect room, the audience is paying attention to you, that's just too easy. Your training ground has to be tougher than a real gig.
So then when you're at a higher level, then you have... Then the audience will bring the best out of you rather than you having a cushy ride.
Because I do music nights as well, and music nights are tough.
They're awful, aren't they? I do them.
But I do music nights a couple of times a week, and when I first started doing them, they were tough. They wouldn't even bat an eyelid at me. But I now go to music nights, and they'll give me 15, 20 minutes because I get their attention.
But if you get a laugh under those conditions, even if it's just a snigger, you know, or if it is just a chortle, you know you've earned it, and you know in a good room that might fly.
Exactly, yeah. So you've earned that, and a music night audience will make you earn it, and that's what I like about music night. I don't understand why comedians don't perform in music night, because that's like a tough gig, and that's
well, you just said it, didn't you?
Yeah, that's designed to bring the best out of you. So, yeah.
It's interesting. I think we've met round the back. Can you remember when your first gig was?
Yeah, I remember.
And more importantly, why did it happen?
So my first gig, I did a course, and I can't remember who it was now, but there was over 100 people in the audience. And I rehearsed so much that I memorized my set, like line for line, word for word. And I remember getting up, and then my mind went blank, and the next thing I knew, I was getting off. So I did my 5 minutes, but I don't remember doing the gig at all. So that was my first gig. And then after I've been gigging for a while, I talk about this on stage. I got in the car, and my wife came and sat in the driver's seat. And she was like really pissed off that day. She didn't speak. But she turned around and she goes, "Why are you doing it? You're not even funny." And I was like, what the hell? Where did that come from? And then she sort of faced the driving seat again, and then she just drove off, said nothing. And I went, right, that's it. I'm going to prove that wrong. That actually gave me the impetus to up my game, to work harder. I'm now divorced.
Yes, the result. So that story's true. I've heard you say it on stage 100 times.
That's right, yeah. That is all true. But she didn't steal my jokes. But yeah, it's all true. And I was like, Jesus. So that's where my impetus comes from, was to prove my ex-wife wrong. That I can make it in the comedy industry. So
how long ago was the first gig?
So the first gig was years ago. I can't remember. It was a long time ago. But my wife didn't like me doing comedy because it doesn't pay.
That's a red flag.
Yeah, that's right. So she was like, "You're not doing this." So she would try to stop me. So she managed to stop me. I think it was like 3 times for about 6 months to a year. And one of those was that we moved to Switzerland, and there's no comedy in Switzerland. So for like over a year...
You should have started one. It would have been really tough. You love that.
I did start one. I started a comedy club in Switzerland, but there was no other comedians there. So
the Joe Bains show.
Yeah. No, so what I did was I got together about 10 guys, and I taught them stand-up comedy. And then
oh my God, while you're learning as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
this sounds like a sitcom.
So I ran a comedy training course in Switzerland. And at the end of it, I put on a showcase, and about 130 people turned up for the showcase. And the showcase lasted like 3 hours because there was like over 10 comedians. And these guys, I spent, I think, about 2 months with them, training them. And I'm learning myself, like... So, but they did well. They did really well because we sat down and we wrote their material in like big groups. It was tough because every lesson that I would give them, I would spend a week learning it myself and then deliver the lesson to them. And then the next week I would learn some more and then deliver the lesson.
That's crazy. And where were you learning from? Just like YouTube tutorials? This is how you do a callback. This is how you die.
I was Googling. I was doing everything. I was also trying to get as much as I can from my limited experience as well. But it was very successful. The guys that I trained there, they still thank me even now for that amazing...
Are they still going? And are they in this country? They stopped?
No, they're still in Switzerland. They're all entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So they all started their own businesses. But I'm friends with them on Facebook. And even now they thank me for that night because they had such an amazing time. So I've run so I'm a comedy teacher as well.
That's incredible. Started teaching on the job, isn't it? I mean, that's incredible.
While still learning his 5 minutes open bar.
Crazy, it's a good story. So what gave you the impetus to get up and do it in the first place? There's always a trigger, be it watching too much comedy or just thinking, right, I need to do something now.
So I used to be an introvert and I was incredibly shy. Like the idea of talking in front of people would give me mini heart attacks. And I was like, no, I can't live like this. I've got to get out of my shell. So I basically joined Toastmasters. I don't know if you've heard of them. So
is it public speaking?
Yeah, public speaking. So Toastmasters. So, and there, it was once a week I'd give a speech. And it was tough.
What do? They train you? Is it about you learning to public speak?
Yes, so you're learning to public speak and you're also learning to think on your feet on the stage. But once a week wasn't enough. So what I did was I joined 3 Toastmasters clubs. I would write a speech and I would deliver the same speech in all 3 clubs, taking the feedback.
See what landed?
Yeah, that's right. See what landed. I remember when I used to go public speaking, my body hated it so much, my brain hated it so much, that from work to going to the public speaking place, I would get headaches. I would get pain in my legs, pain in my shoulder, like everything physically to stop me from getting there. But once I got there, all those symptoms would disappear, but I had physical pain to stop me from going.
What made you think, right, I'm fed up of being shy, I'm going to do this, I'm go through this painful process and try and...
Well, the thing is, the way I see it, and that's just me, is that you have to be outgoing, you have to be an extrovert, you have to go out and reach out to people, and I wanted to be successful, obviously, and if I'm an introvert and I'm shy and I have no social skills, you cannot be successful if you're doing that unless you just want to make money. So I needed to get out of my shell. And so basically I just kept throwing myself on stage. And one day I remember my first time on stage, by the way, my very, very first time, was at Toastmasters doing it was about 30 people in the audience. And we were doing table topics. So basically they give you a topic and you have to think on your feet for 2 minutes on that topic. But they choose you at random. So I'd put my name down. And so there's 6 other people on there. And every time this woman went up to introduce the next person, as a name was about to be read out, my heart rate would go through the roof, my mouth would go dry, and my legs would turn to jelly, and I'd have a mini heart attack. And so, but I was the last one called. So by the time I called up on stage, I'd had about 6 mini heart attacks. Because between each one, I would have a mini heart attack.
Well, like proper palpitations, feeling it.
Everything. And then eventually she called my name. I got up on stage, my brain shut down, literally just shut down. My heart rate was at 500, and I completely forgot everything. So I stood there for 30 seconds, said nothing, and then eventually I remembered my name. I said it and I sat down. And I know it was 30 seconds because the woman then came back on and she went, Joe Bains, 30 seconds, well done, whoa! And I was just sitting there going, what the fuck was that? So that basically got me hooked. I was like, right, I've got to overcome this. So I basically just went 3 times a week, Toastmasters.
What was your thought after that? Were you angry that you hadn't done it? Or did you suddenly see a glimmer that you think, actually, I can do this?
Yeah, well, it felt like, it gave me a high. I got a high from it, like a high you would get from drugs. And I was buzzing. And I was like, oh my God, this is better than taking drugs. And that sort of hooked me, and plus I had to get over it as well. So I just kept doing it. It's the only way. But you just keep banging your head against the brick wall until... But I remember like a year into it, I remember getting up on stage once, about a year into it, yeah. And I wasn't nervous, and my heart wasn't at 500, and my brain was still turned on. And I was like, oh my God, I've done it. I finally made it. I can finally think on stage. And then I started doing stand-up after that. So.
It's an amazing story because I've always been pretty extroverted, but I can understand introverts, and also a lot of people can't believe that comics can be introverts, but it kind of makes sense because when you're on stage, you're either play acting or you're being a sort of amped up version of you. Also, it's a different dynamic. When I'm on stage, or a comic on stage has the right just to talk and be loud and obnoxious and do whatever their character, whatever their performance requires. Off stage, in a pub afterwards, oh, hey, how are you? Like, it's different. Do you find there's a difference between you? Are you shyer off stage or not? Or did you kind of manage to take the power of public speaking into your day-to-day life?
So I'm now an extrovert. I don't need to go and hide in a corner to recharge my batteries. I get my power now from socializing. So I am now permanently extroverted. But I still remember, being an introvert and having to run off every 20 minutes, hide in a corner for half an hour, cry, and to recharge my batteries. But now I don't need to do that. I'm totally shifted. So.
Weird. Were you introverted at school, or?
I was a complete introvert. In school, I had no friends except for the bullies. I was a teacher's pet. And my time in school was spent reading comics.
Wow.
And playing with computers. That was it. That was my...
Because when I'm on a lineup with you, I always think, this might be an alright show, because if no one turns up, I can guarantee that you and me are going to harangue all the punters that are in and try and drag them in. And it's great training for flying to Edinburgh. And I can understand why comics don't do it, because it's embarrassing and it's hard work and you might get rejected. But I've travelled probably quite a long way to do the gig. The hell am I going to do it to no one, right?
Exactly. Well, I see flyering and trying to bring the audiences as part of the gig. Even if the promoter doesn't need me to flyer or to to go around and ping people to try to get them, I will still do it.
I'm trying to see it that way, and I always offer and I always go and do it now, even if because it's never how bad can it be? The worst comes to worst, you get sworn at, and I'd rather get rejected by everyone in the pub than have no one in because I didn't try.
Well, the thing is, I think that's just part of the gig for me. To go around the pub trying to get people in is just an extension of that gig, and I will try to banter with the audience, with the people in the pub as well. So for me, that's my extrovert training.
So your set is all about a lot of your heritage and where you grew up from. Yeah, where were you? Because I don't know. Because I just all I know is stuff from your jokes, and you talk about your Indian family, and I don't know what's true and what's not. Where were you? I'm not going to ask you a past, but where were you born? Were you born here or there or where?
So what I did was I created a character, and my character is an immigrant and a terrorist and racist because I've got brown skin. So my thinking is that gives me like a license to be racist, to be terrorist, and to be an immigrant without anybody being able to accuse me of any of those. But I do get sometimes audience members going, there could be somebody in the audience that had somebody die from a terrorist attack. That would offend them. And I'm like, you can't please everybody in the audience. If there is, then tough. That.
Also, your jokes, the way you handle those. I don't want to spoil your punchlines, but it's quite gentle and silly. It like sometimes it looks like you're going to make a serious point about racism, and then you flip it and go for like something really, really silly. So it's like. It's very much obviously framed within a joke, and it seems like, and you're also playing across other people's perceptions of you. So you're kind of giving yourself a license because of prejudices, but then using it to do a silly bit of humour.
Yes, and plus, being brown, I can get away with it. But I do get audience members every now and then coming up to me, but do you have to do a joke about Muslims? Do you have to talk about terrorism? Do you have to be racist on stage? I get that. And I'm like, whoa, hang on a minute. Look, have you seen my skin colour? What are you guys talking about? But I do get the people I find that get offended most, and they come and tell me about it, are white people. White people love to get offended on behalf of another race. I'm Indian. I'm taking the piss out of Indians. I get white people coming up to me saying how offended they are that I'm taking the piss out of Indians. I'm like, well, that's me, I'm taking the piss out of my own culture. I'm allowed to do that. You can make jokes about, Catholic and blowing priests and shagging, all that kind of stuff. I'm allowed to talk about, my culture. But they don't. A lot of white people don't understand that. I don't know why. Maybe you can answer that.
I don't know. I think because I guess it's because people feel guilty, so they want to. I think there's two reasons. Could be more. I reckon self-importance. If you feel offended, you've got a platform to go. Oh, well, suddenly you can make yourself unimportant. And I really think being offended has become a national hobby. Yeah. And I also think that sometimes people are just hypersensitive because. I'm a nice guy, I don't want to be called racist, so therefore I'll stick up and be the opposite of racist, so they overdo it, rather than just going out there and being nice to everyone. The second they hear something that might be that might be perceived as racist, they get on their high horse and try and defend it, and maybe that's offsetting some sort of guilt, because they've been the privileged ones for so many years. Yeah. I think maybe, I don't know, this is my little theory.
I did a gig in Devon, and it was completely white, like not a brown person or a black person inside. And the audience came up to me afterwards, several people, and they were, look, there's no way we could have laughed at that, because otherwise we'd have been racist. But if there's a couple of black people or a couple of brown people in the audience and they laugh, that basically gives white people...
It is instant. When you see racial humour used, everyone looks to them and just to say, right. Is it okay?
Yes, that's right. So if there are brown or black people, I will point them out. So that the audience knows, look, they're laughing. It's okay.
If they're not, you're screwed though, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right, I am, yeah. I did a gig in Norwich some while back, and again, there was no brown or black people there, and again, I died there. So I've died in Devon, and I've died in Norwich in front of an all-white audience. So now what I do is I go, oh, by the way, and I'll do that after one or two jokes, is I go, oh, by the way, I am brown. This is not just a really shitty tan. So if you heckle me, that is racist. And if they laugh at that, then they relax, because now I've pointed out. Because I think it's my voice. My voice is too white. And it confuses the audience. Oh, by the way, I am an immigrant. I was born in a village in India.
So that bit is true.
Yeah, that is all true. Yeah, I'm my village in India. There was only 2 houses with electricity. It was a proper backward village. You know.
So you set up the toughest gig in the world.
Yeah,
I guess.
There's so you see in those documentaries in Africa about those villages. Well, we have villages like that in India as well, and I come from one of those villages. And when I first came over to the UK, I was about 10. I didn't know any English, like not even hello. And one of the first words I learnt was the word bastard. But I didn't know what it meant. And I remember it even now. The word sounded beautiful. You know the sound it made? The word from the word bastard. It was like music to my ears. And I would run around the outside and shout it at the top of my lungs because I thought it must mean something beautiful. Because it's such a beautiful sounding word, because it was. But then somebody stopped me, some people that I was, and they were, no, that's not what it means. This is what it means. But once I remember, as soon as they told me what it meant, that word no longer sounded beautiful. As soon as I learned the meaning behind the word, that word lost its beauty. That sound, lost its beauty. Do you know? So I was like, wow. So our perceptions are coloured by the meaning we give things in a massive way. So yeah. So that was my experience of English. But I had to develop an English accent, and it's paid dividends. It took me, I think I did a lot of training for a couple of years to get a British accent. So I used to listen to Radio 4 all the time. I would have Radio 4 in the background for like 4 or 5 hours a day. And then I used to practice speaking slowly and pronouncing every syllable. So I read the entire works of Charles Dickens slowly, loudly, and pronouncing every syllable. So that took me years to do. Oh, my name, Joe, by the way, that's not my real name. That name is made up. So when I left uni, I have a real name.
So the bit you do with a really, really, really long name, is that actually true?
No.
Oh no, it can't be that long,
it's
really.
not that. So my real name is Jogendra Singh Bains, yeah? I'm Joe Bains. I've been voted as the Indian with the whitest name. By immigration. 5 years in a row. But my full name is Joseph. मेरा नाम बहुत बहुत बड़ा है, बहुत बहुत लंबा हो गया. जाओ लोग रोटी खा लो, चाय पी लो, शराब पी लो, फिर छोटा हो गया. Bains. But it's all right, guys. I've shortened it, so you can call me Joe. मेरा नाम बहुत बहुत बड़ा है, बहुत बहुत लंबा हो गया. जाओ लोग रोटी खा लो, चाय पी लो, शराब पी लो, फिर छोटा हो गया. Bains. Did you guys get that? Yeah. Of course you did. Now she'll go 1, 2, 3. That's racist. I'm kidding. That's just the Indian takeaway menu. I came out of uni. This is actually completely true. When I came out of uni, I couldn't get a job. I would apply for like 50. I'd send out 50 job applications, 100 job applications. Nothing. Zero. Zilch. And I was like, what the hell do I do? So then I went through my CV. And I changed my name to Joe Bains. And then I went through my CV line by line and removed any references to India or being an immigrant, so that it looked like it was a white person's CV. Oh my God, you would not believe the change that it created. Literally within 2 weeks of 2 or 3 weeks of doing that, I had 6 job interviews lined up.
That shows a very sad reflection on our country, really, doesn't it? Or because it means that they just didn't want Indians and also. Were they surprised when you turned up?
Yes. So that's the beauty bit. So the jobs I was applying were in computers. So the first interview is always on the phone. And because I sound British and my CV there's no reference to and my name Joe, they would just assume I was white. So they would interview me on the phone, I would pass that, and then they would call me in for a face-to-face. And as I'm walking into the interview room, and the guy who's going to interview me is at the other end of the room, I'd be watching his eyes, because I'm expecting that reaction, Whoa, hang on a minute, isn't he supposed to be white?
It's sad, isn't it? Were they just trying to feel out people who couldn't speak English, or is it worse than that? Is it just integral racism to the job market?
I think because they would offer me a job at the end. So they would interview me for 2 hours, and I got very good at interviews. So 80-90% of the time I would get a job offer at the end of it. So I don't think they were racist. I think it's just subliminal prejudice. Oh, that name looks a bit foreign. I think on the surface they weren't racist, but I think there's some prejudice underneath. And because when I turned up, I was dressed as a white person, I spoke like a white person, I sounded like a white person, I acted like a white person, that my immigrant status no longer mattered to them. Because they would all offer me a job.
You do need to speak English to do a lot of jobs in this country, and that isn't racist, but it does seem like there was something deeper and darker going on.
So if I'd had an Indian accent, I would not have got through even the first interview, because they would have heard an Indian accent.
But it's just even an Indian name to block you.
That's right.
That's worrying.
Yeah, I suppose. But I don't see any problem with it. Well, when I say I don't see a problem with it, the way I see it, my jungle, my environment when I came to Britain is what it is. It's this environment. And in this environment, having a British name, having a British accent is an asset. And it opens up doors in this jungle that normally wouldn't be open. And so in my, jobs in the city, everything, those training for a British accent paid off massively. I reckon I would not be where I am. I would not have gotten the success I have if I did not have a British accent.
To be honest, it would have been hard getting you on the podcast. I would have been worried about the listener not understanding you. Yeah. So now you've taken all your... I think we should wrap up soon because the gig's going to start. But you've taken all your learnings from self-confidence, going all the way to that. Now you do your own confidence training courses.
Yeah, that's right.
So is that a recent development? And is it about sort of passing on what you've learnt to help other shy people, or...?
So I started doing this about a year ago. So far, I think I've had about 40 students, and most have been women, which I found quite surprising, because I really designed it for guys, because I'm a guy, and so I understand confidence problems from a guy's perspective. So one of the reasons I started running them was I learned a lot of hacks on tips and stuff and little tweaks.
I watched on the video the whole speaking from your chest so you don't sound scared, and then you kind of kid yourself into believing you're feeling safer than you are, and I thought that was very clever.
Yeah, I mean, it's also one of the reasons I started teaching it was to take myself to the next level. Because if you really want to understand something, if you really want to embody something into your very core, you've got to be able to teach it. And so when I started teaching, I learned even more. And now at the moment, I'm writing a book on confidence training. So I started writing my book last week, and I hope to publish it in the next couple of weeks. And I also met these two women last night at Museum of Comedy, and one of them worked for Spotify, and we started brainstorming for me a podcast.
The Joe Bains Confidence Podcast or something.
Yes, that's right. So I've exchanged details with them, and they're going to help me start a confidence podcast on Spotify. So,
oh my God, I'm trying to get my podcast on Spotify, but they won't reply to my emails.
Oh, one day. Oh, I have a contact now.
Sweet, put in a word. Awesome. Well, Joe, where can people find you?
So I'm everywhere. So if you Google, Joe Bains Comedy, anywhere. So I use that Joe Bains Comedy on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I've also put myself on Google as well. So if you just Google that, Joe Bains Comedy, it'll find me.
This is the Stand and Deliver Comedy Podcast with Rhodders.
That was Joe Bains. Excellent to catch up with Joe, and sounds like he'll be starting a rival podcast very soon. So thanks very much for listening. I'd like to know who you are, if you are listening. If you're not listening, then you wouldn't have heard that. That was a redundant sentence. You can email me, info@rhodders.com. Right, couple of bits and bobs. At the Stand and Deliver Comedy Club, it's all go. We don't have an August break. While other comedy clubs are sitting in their Y-fronts on a beach somewhere doing nothing, we run shows right the way through the summer. Our next show is on August the 9th. It's a Thursday. Our venue is Smoking Billy's in the centre of Reading. Our headliner is the incredible Bobby Mayer. He's absolutely brilliant. He's been on 8 out of 10 Cats, and you might have also seen him on Never Mind the Buzzcocks. We've also got support from Caitlin Vine, Harvey Hawkins, and Catherine Mather, and a bloke called Rhodders, i.e. me. I'll be hosting the evening, and the reason I'm emceeing my club, I don't often perform at my own club, but I am this time because I'm getting ready for Edinburgh. Very excited about that. But before I tell you about that, you can buy tickets to see Bobby Mayer at my comedy club. Go to facebook.com/Stand and Deliver Comedy Night and click on the big blue Book Now button. And or you can look us up on Billetto, Billetto, the ticketing website. Buy your tickets while you can, because once you can't, you can't. Right, let's have some highlights from my own gig diary before I say goodbye. On the 4th of August, I'm emceeing a lovely afternoon gig called Coffee, Cocktails and Jokes, 2 p.m. at the King and Queen on Foley Street. Always good fun, nice mix of acts there. As I just mentioned, 9th of August, I'm emceeing my own comedy club, Stand and Deliver, headlined by Bobby Mayer. And in August, from the 20th until the 26th, it's Mirth in the Morning, 10 past 11 every morning that week at the Loft in the Counting House. It's me hosting with a different lineup every single day. I can reveal to you, one of the acts appearing with me will be Joe Bains, who of course we heard from earlier. Unless you skipped the interview to listen to the post-amble. I don't know why you bother doing that. It'd be very weird, but, you know, it takes all sorts to listen to podcasts these days. So yeah, I'm desperate to tell you about some of the other acts we've signed up for the show, but I think I'm going to leave it until the next episode just to tease you a bit longer. And all the information about these gigs can be found at the website rhodders.com, RHODDERS.com. Do me a huge favour, please. If you've been enjoying this podcast, you can leave us a nice review on iTunes or whatever podcast service you listen to. A lot of you are on iTunes, so go to itunes.rhodders.com is the quick link through. Give us a nice review, because what it does, it not only massages my ego, it also boosts us up the charts, which means more ears, which means I'm far more likely to be motivated into producing more of these episodes. So yeah, this has been the Stand and Deliver Comedy Podcast. Thanks very much for listening. I've been Rhodders.